In this video, I'm going to discuss the ADO.NET CRUD implementation. CRUD means create, read, update, and delete records using your C# application that is connected to a database. To start, let us identify the objectives of our discussion. Number one, we need to use the MySQL data classes to manage database records using C#. Display subform for data entry. Write C# method that will execute the insert, into, update, and delete MySQL commands. And number four, we are going to create a method, or we write statements that will validate user input so that we can identify if the user filled up properly the required fields for our program. But before we start, let me give you an overview of what particular implementation that we will be doing in this particular video. So in this example, we will be using our template, the previous activity that we developed. So in this application, notice that we have this data grid in our program, and we have here two extra columns and has two buttons. These buttons allows us to edit a particular record and delete a selected record. And also, I have added a button that is called new product so that we can add a new product. So let's try implementing this functionality. So in this example, when you click the add new button, it will pop up a new form that is for new data. So let's try demonstrating what this action is all about, or this form is all about. So for example, I will try to add a new product, including the product code, and then description, for example, item to quantity. For example, this is the quantity that is, or the stock of the product inside the data. Let's say, for example, 1000. And reorder level, this is the minimum products record, which means if the product reaches the minimum, you need to reorder. You are going to be alerted if the product is in minimum stock, so that the owner will be notified if he or she needs to reorder this particular product, let's say 10 items. Then the price, for example, I will be inputting the price of the item, let's say 100, or 100, and discount percentage, let's say 3%. For example, if you are going to implement, or example, in purchase, the user asks for a discount, you are going to use this discount rate as the discount. And then notice in this form, I have a selection combo box that allows me to identify which vendor offers this product. So let's say this one, and save. And then a pop-up will open to allow the user notified if the product is successfully added. Click OK. Okay. So after adding the product, notice that this product is now added in our database. So let's try to search the product using description. Okay. Item. Okay. Now, for example, we want to delete or edit this product. Okay. So let's say item number 4. Save. Okay. Success. Now we have the item number 4 here. Let's say we want to delete it. Okay, so this will message a pop-up will allows you to confirm if you really want to delete the product. Now, since this product is a newly added product, it's easier to delete this one because it's not yet connected to a particular transaction. So if you are going to delete a record, make sure that this is not yet related to another table, because it will ask permission to delete. Okay, so for now, let's focus on how to implement CRUD, simple CRUD implementation. We will go to that particular advanced implementation later in our class. Okay, then delete. So as you can see, upon delete, the form automatically refresh the records coming from the data grid. So that's what we are trying to aim in this activity. So in order to start, let me give you the files for this activity. So these are the tools and materials needed for this activity. Make sure you have the XAMPP installed, the community edition of Sql for the portable version. In some case, the portable version is not working in Windows 10. So if you want to acquire the SQL community edition, just search this in your Google search engine and look for SQL community edition. It's free and you need to install it on your computer. Of course, the PDF, because I have uploaded an instruction. Our requirements for this program is Visual Studio 2010 or higher. The minimum version is 2010 so that it will be easier for you to develop, and it requires minimal specification on your computer. And of course, our classes, you don't need to install the MySQL connector anymore. All you have to do is to download the MySQL data.dll and also the database that we will be working. If you already have these items or files in your computer, no need to download them. And of course, our template for this task, the task 5 files. So you need to download this from this link. Okay, so make sure you download it and extract into a specific location, for example, desktop, so that you can easily locate it when you extracted the file. Okay, before we start, make sure you downloaded the files and store them in your desktop. For example, I have already acquired the file. So in this case, I stored my file or my downloaded task 5 start file into my desktop. So make sure it is completely extracted. So let us open the project. So let me give you a tour of the contents of the file. Okay, let's wait for our application to load the file. So here it is. Now, in this particular document, excuse me. Okay, in this particular document, we will be looking for the project files or the components of this project. So you have these two forms. So I already made this template so that will be easier for you to follow the instruction that I will be discussing later. So I have this product list form, so it will allows us to display the list of the products. So as you can see, I have now the form, and this will allows us to display the contents of the products table. I already have the buttons and of course the subform. So if you want to add a subform, all you have to do is to right click your project and add a new form. So something like that. Make sure you rename your form depending on the purpose of that particular form. And as you can see, I have now the button cancel and save. So when you save the document, it must identify if the user successfully inputted the required data. Now let's go back to our form. Okay, so when you run this form, it will be like this. Okay, so as you can see, when you run the form, it already contains the button needed. Okay, so how do we develop this one? So to add buttons to your data grid, all you have to do is to right click your data grid. Okay, edit columns and add. So notice we have here two buttons. So to add that button, all you have to do is to add a new column and choose a button column. So that's how you implement that. So as you can see in my button, once you add a button, you need to edit its properties. For example, the text of my button is edit, and the other properties of that is, of course, you need to personally modify the size and etc. So that's how you add button. So when you add a button, so let's try to add a new one. Let's say other text. Okay, so I will be using a blank Okay, so for example, I want to make this uh, a new button. So let's look for the caption, the text. Okay. So let's say hello. Okay. Then, as you can see, I have now a header text. So let's start adding the. So I'm not going to put up the header text. Instead, I will be putting. Okay. Sorry. This button is a text box. Sorry, I will add another. So choose button. Okay. Okay. And then your text, header text, let's remove the header text. Instead, we type the text. Let's say hello. Okay. Now, let's click the OK button. Okay. So when you run your program, it will be like this one. When you notice that the button is not actually appearing when in design mode, but in running mode, so your button is now appeared at the last portion of your data grid. Okay, so now let's modify our button so that it will display a caption that we needed. So upon clicking your button, so in your properties, always choose true so that what you type here in your text will appear in your button. So let's start there. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so this is now your button. So it's ready for your implementation. But for now, let us remove this, and I just demonstrated how you add for button to your form or data grid. So I just remove this one. Okay. Okay. Now let us try to add functionality for our add. Let's start with create or insert into a new record to our. Okay. So in order to allow your form to display a subform, to allow the user to input their new data or new products for a new record, let us try to implement the subform functionality. So in this particular line, we have now the button new. So let's try to resize it so that it will be visible in your part. Okay, so in this case, we have a new button. So how do we implement uh, displaying a new form after the user click the new button? So first, let us create or call the form name of our form. So we have here the form name. So the form name of our subform is FRM product AE, that is for add edit. And let's say create an instance of that object, new product equals to new FRM AE. Okay. So in order to display the subform, you need to call the new object that show dialog. Show dialog. The purpose of show dialog is to make our form. So the purpose of this show dialog method is to allow our object, the new form, to display in a model form. When you say model form, uh, the priority of our application is focused on this particular object. So let's try to run this one and examine the difference. Okay, so this is now my form. So as you can see, it's already displayed in our screen. So when you click the new product button, so the secondary form will pop up. So notice, our first form is inactive. When you say inactive, you are not allowed to use the first form. Instead, our focus is the secondary form. So the secondary form will be usable if you close down this form. So that's the purpose of modal. Instead of showing only the instead of show method, we use show dialog to make sure that the focus of the user is on the secondary form. So they need, or he or she needs to uh, finish processing the transaction or the adding or editing a record before it can proceed to the second form. So that's the purpose of show dialog. So sometimes the user doesn't use show dialog, instead the show method only. So it depends upon your program or implementation of uh, your program. So let's proceed to uh, the next. Okay, let's close this first. So our focus right now is move to the add form. Okay, so how do we add a new record? So let's double click our save button. Okay, so first the user requires to input the needed data for the form. So after inputting the new data, he will then, or he or she will be using the save button to save the inputted data. So first, uh, let us uh, try to identify what particular vendor uh, the new record will be connected. So to do that, let us first load the records coming from the vendor table. So to do that, I have already created from your template a method to display or fill the contents of the combo box. So this is now the uh, code that I develop or method that I develop. So this is called fill combo box. So it requires the SQL command to retrieve a specific record from a table. So the value member allows us to identify uh, when a combo box is selected, what particular record to be identified, and when the user runs or displays your form, what particular record will be displayed in your combo box. Okay, so this is the value and this is the display. So this will now, the contents of this one, a specific column that will display records or loads into your combo box, while this one, when you select a record from a combo box, what particular identifier that will be used in order to identify selected item in your combo box. So now, this particular method is the same with our implementation of our previous method, the display query or the query to run the query. So what's the difference? Instead of returning a data table, in this case, we use the data table to, by the way, this one. We use the data table to load the record into your combo box. So now, as you can see, I have uh, 4 arguments: the SQL command, the value member, the display member, and the name of the combo box. So when you call this method, you will be calling the combo box to insert the record coming from the database, and you are going to set the data that is being inserted to the combo box or the data source for the combo box. The value member, this will be the identifier. If the record is selected or one of the content of the combo box is selected, what will be the value that is representing that particular selected data? And the display member, what particular record that will be displayed when the combo box is clicked. So let's try to display our record coming from the combo box. Okay, to do that, okay, to load the record, so you need to call the class. So CLS database. Okay, CLS database dot fill combo box. Okay, so let us try to select the vendor. Select. So as you notice, we have this record here. So when you click down the vendor, so we need to display the record or the name of the vendor. This will become the display member, and this will become the value member. So which means in your combo box, when you select a particular name of the vendor, it will be represented by the vendor code as a display value. That is value member. So we need to display the vname and the vendor code. Okay, so let's try. Let's go back. Okay, so select asterisk from vendor. So this will now the query that will be executed. So for value member, when your record from a combo box selected, what will be the representation of that record? So v code. Okay, why v code? Because when you add a new product, it is required that the product is being connected using the vendor code. As you can see in our table, okay, as you can see in our table, this product is connected to a particular vendor. So this will now be the identifier which vendor is connected to this product. So that's why in our program, we will be using vendor code as our link to that particular product. So vendor code, next. Display member, what particular column that we need to use to display the record? So this will be the vendor name. And our fourth parameter that is required for the method is the combo box name. So CBO vendor. Okay. So when you run this application, it will now automatically populate your form with a particular record coming from the vendor. So let's click start new, and as you can see, I have now the records of all the vendors coming from the vendor table. Okay, so let's continue. Let's close them down. Okay, now so let's go to save. Okay, so to allow your program to add a new record, all you have to do is to write statements. So when you use statement, you will be executing the command insert into. Insert into command in database management allows you to add new records. So let's start by adding new record. Later we will try to validate the text box, but for now let's try to implement insert into. So SQL. Okay, let's start declaring a variable first. So string. There is now MySQL command equals blank. Okay. SQL equals. Let's put an @ sign so that it will be multi-line. Okay. So this is the command or the syntax for insert into. So to write insert into command, all you have to do is to insert those commands into a string. So insert into the vendor, the table is product. So let's start. Okay. Now you need to specify a particular column. So in this case, I will be identifying the columns for the product. So in our info, we have this list of columns. So let's copy paste, copy paste, comma, description, copy, comma, oops. For indate, we will try to create a function that retrieves the current date of your computer so that we no longer allows the user to add, since it's obvious that when you add a product, automatically we need to retrieve the date already. So no need for the user to input the current date. So quality, quantity on hand. Okay, this is all about the stocks. Minimum, paste, price, paste, and of course the discount. Okay, last but not the least, the vendor code. Okay, so as you can see in our table, the product is referenced to the vendor code. So that's why it's required that we need to identify which vendor is connected to this product. So That's the purpose of our combo box. Okay, now what's next? So you just identify the column for that particular record. So now let us identify the value that we will be inserting to that particular field. So values, so this one. Okay, so let me copy paste this one so that there will be, so it will not be confusing for me to match column to a particular record. So which means this one is for when you insert a value, you are guided with this particular column. So when you insert a record to a database, if the data is string, so just identify the column of the database. Let's say this one is markers, which means we need to enclose it in a single quote. Okay, something like this. Okay, so this is for vendor code. Okay, and then the record is came from the text box, so you need to perform the following action. So first, you need to write the text box. So you need to add 2 double quotes so that this string will be closed, and this is the opening for the second string. Second, 2 plus sign for concatenation. Then we add the name of the text box to the center or the blank line. So which means in this particular single quotes, we'll be inserting the contents coming from the text box. Okay, so this will replace the defined string to the contents of the text box. So 2 double quotes, since description is string, 2 double quotes, okay, 2 plus sign, and then type the description, so txt description. So the contents of this column is came from description. So okay, so let me use the second line so that it will be not confusing at my part. Okay, that one. Okay. Okay, next, using quantity on hand. I think this is a numeric, so no need for single quote. So I will be closing this down so that this string will be closed, and another opening quotation for this section of string, and then I will add 2 plus sign. Okay, and txt quantity on hand. That's it. Okay, by the way, I forgot to mention that we need to mention in this particular insert into the date. Okay, so I forgot, so let us copy paste the date. Okay, so go, which means we'll be inserting the date. So let me enter, and let's try adding another date. Okay, so to do that, to insert the date, we need to get the current date of your computer. So we'll be using the date and time function. Okay, so date and time, that now to get the current date, now that string to string. Okay, in MySQL database, the format of dates is you need to properly format the date to match the format of your database. So in this case, our date is it has a corresponding equivalent format. In this case, we have year, month, and day. So therefore, when you insert a date into your program or into your insert query, you must also format your date according to the database format. So in this case, YYY, 2 M's for month, and 2 D's for day. Something like that. Okay, so now, let us add the comma. By the way, dates are enclosed with single quote, so do not forget to enclose them with single quote. So I will be adding single quote here. Okay, now close down that, and okay, so now next is my quantity. Okay, then followed by, since pmin field is a numeric, so I will be closing this one and without quotes, and of course new line, and replace this with txt. Okay, minimum or the order level, the text. Okay, plus. Okay, so now I think this is properly terminated. So this one, since this also applies, so let me add two double quotes for this string and for this string, and two plus sign to use the text box uh, price. Okay, so price. Oops, sorry. Okay, fix the price. Okay, that text. Okay, now for discount, I will perform the same method. So two double quotes, two plus sign, and txt discount. Okay. Later we will be implementing the what we call form validation. So next for vendor code, okay, let's close this one, two double quotes, two plus sign, and CDO vendor dot selected value. So if ever the user selected an item from our text box or from our combo box, the data that will be inserted in our database is the vendor code instead of the vendor name. Since in our table products, the data that is being required to insert the product is the vendor code. Okay, so this is now your command. Okay, so let's try to perform debugging to display the particular record when we try to execute that particular command. To use the debug method, you need to add the following line using, okay, because by default the debug method for our C# is not using the uh, library. So debug system dot diagnostics. Okay, so let's try. So always ensure that when you execute commands like this one, review it first before executing them to your database to minimize confusion, or to, you know, you will not encounter any errors later. Okay, just right now let's try to test if our script or our let's say SQL command is complete without any missing commas and etc. So let's try. So debug, the print is SQL. Okay. Now let's try running this one. Okay. Okay. So now just click new product. Let's try 111 test quantity 100, level 5, price let's say 100, and percent is 6. So let's try to use other select vendor, so D and supply. So save. Okay, so if you want to examine the output, all you have to do is look for the output window. Okay, so now let me close down some other window. Okay, so as you can see, I have now the statement here. So if you try to examine the code description, okay, the values that will be inserted to our database are the following: the product code, the description, the date of insertion, the price, and so on. So as you can see, this is now the code of the vendor selected. So if we try to identify from our database that we to check, so the DNE, okay, so I think we successfully identified the selected vendor coming from the selected value coming from the combo box. So 21231. Okay, so now our statement is actually correct. So now let's proceed. So how do we execute this command into our program? So to execute this command, so we will be using the same implementation we do, but we have a small changes. Okay, so to execute that, all you have to do is to run the query execute. Okay, so we need to develop a new method to execute insert, update, and delete. So in this example, we need to create new one. Let's say method name, so execute. This method is used to execute the create or the insert into the update and delete. The only different method we use for selecting is we have separate method for selecting. Instead of this one, we have the same methodology. So okay, so let's identify. So in order to execute that query, let us copy paste our code from here. So I'm going to copy code or copy my codes for statements coming from the retrieved data. So start from using, and of course you need to, okay, let's minimize this one so that, okay, so now I'm going to copy paste the entire contents of my method. The method name is data table query data, so from here to here. So this is now the open and the close. So copy and paste them down to our new method. So I'm going to name our new method as public so that it will be accessible outside this class. Static. I will be using boolean so that it will, if the implementation is successful, it will return true. So execute SQL Query. So by the way, let's provide necessary return to boolean. Okay, so query. So we need to ask, create an argument so that when this one is called, your parameter will be the SQL command. So SQL. Okay. So when you develop a method with a return statement, so it requires a return. So okay, so let's try pasting our code. Okay, now, so as you can see, I have now this particular line. So it will open or connect to your database. It will open the connection. Okay, so the difference now is instead of this one, we'll be removing this one. So what will happen is we'll be executing the command that execute non-query. So this one will execute, because the difference between execute non-query and execute reader is execute reader returns a record, while this one, it returns true or false. So which means if the execution is correct, so we will be executing true. So return true. Okay. And of course, this will become false. Okay. So counter while attempting to add or attempting to execute commands in your database. Okay. Now, let's try implementing this one. So let's try to add a new product. Okay, so test number 1. So new product 111. Okay, description test quantity 100, item 5, price is 100, 3%. Then DNE supply, save. So let's see if the product is already added in our database. So let us refresh this item here, refresh. Okay, so notice we don't have yet. By the way, it's not yet done. I forgot to mention that, of course, we just develop a method, but we haven't used it yet. Okay, so I forgot. Sorry. Okay, so to do that, you need to use that method. So, in order to use that method, since it actually requires to return a boolean, okay, so what you need to do is to write if statement. So if we're going to check if the implementation is successful, so that's why. So let's call the CLS the class database dot execute query, then pass the SQL or the SQL command, then of course this. So if this one is successful, we need to develop a message box. So to do that, message box that show, okay, record successfully saved. Okay, let's add description, new product. Okay, and then of course we must inform the user, okay, the type, okay, the type of button. So buttons that okay only, okay, and of course message box icon, let's say information. So there. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so let us try. I hope it's actually working. So let's pray for it. Okay, so now I have this form. So let's add a new. Okay, let's start 111 test 1 100 quantity 5, price is 100, and discount rate is 3%, and of course the DND supply, and save. Okay, since it displays say successfully saved, let us try to display or examine the database. So refresh. Okay, I don't see any test, but it says it's actually saved. What's happening here? So let's try to examine. Okay, from this record, insert into product. Okay, so let's try. Okay, so let's see what's happening here. Let me go back. Okay. By the way, I'm using the vendor. That's why. So, my bad. Okay, so now, here's the product. Okay, so I guess because of... Okay, so this is now the product. So, we successfully implemented. So, let's go back to our program. Okay. Okay. But as you can see, I think what we need to do after the user successfully inserted the product, we must close down this form, and of course when we close the form, this particular grid should be updated, so this will automatically refresh so that the newly added record will be added to our list. Okay, so let's try to do that. Okay, so to do that, we need to add line here, and of course, uh, close down our program after successful insertion of the record. So this post. Okay, this post means, or this does close. Okay, so now let's go back to our list and go to our uh, button new. This will pop up the form. So after we pop up the form, we add the record, and after the form new product closes down, we need to refresh the record. So how do we do that? So we're going to recycle a code coming from our form that we use from displaying the product. So to do that, you need to go to your form load from your product list and copy paste down this line. Okay, so copy paste. So this will now reset the record coming from data grid. It will reload the data coming from your record. So when you add a new product, it will be refreshed, and let's test. Okay, okay, let's add a new product. 222. By the way, I'm going to use 222 because 111 is existing. So our database will not allow to insert record with the same code because it's a primary key. So we are not allowed to duplicate. So let's say test number 2. So quantity 100. The order 5. Say 200 and 4. Let's say. Now let's use another supplier. So DNE save. Okay, successfully saved. Examine. When I click the message box, it will be closed out, and the form new will be closed down automatically, and your form is refreshed. So that's how you refresh. So this line is very important in order to automatically reload your record coming from the database so that the data grid will be updated with the new record. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is how do we, so let me close this one down. Okay, so how do we implement the edit record? So we have a new record. By the way, let's focus first on the new one. Okay, so how do we check if the user is, uh, let's say, the code is required. So we need to insert a form validation. To do a simple form validation, all you have to do is to add a condition that checks if the text box is empty or not. So to do that, let's create a method to check empty text boxes. Okay, so so this is the opening and close. Okay, so start here. So method check empty text boxes, rather, instead of checkbox, text boxes. Okay, so to do that, we must create a method public static which returns boolean. It will return true if the checkbox is empty, false if the checkbox contains a data. So check text box. Okay, so text box object, so txt. I will also add a string, the title. So let's see if the code is empty, so we'll be mentioning the product code is must not be left blank and so on. So this is the title or the caption of the empty field. Okay, so let's create. Okay, so now, okay, of course it returns true or false. So if string that is null or empty, of course the txt.text of the object, so we'll be displaying a message, okay, that message box show. Okay, so title Okay, must not be left blank. Of course, we will add a caption to our message box required. Okay, and of course, message box uh, buttons that is okay only, and of course the icon is that exclamation, so it's a warning symbol. Okay, now focus the text box, that focus, so that the user will be identified which text box is empty. So return true because the text box is empty. If not, let us return false. So return false. Okay, now let's move to our form here and there. So how do we implement this one? So you need to create a condition to identify before you save your document. You need to check first if, let's say, CLS database dot check text box. What is the name of your text box to check? That is the code. Okay, then the name of this text or the name of the record that will be contained here is the product code. So product code. Okay, so if this one is true, we will perform a return statement, which means this return statement will stop executing the preceding lines. Okay, so let's try. Okay, new product, save. Okay, so as you can see, this is now the title of the field that is required, that is submitted, and it actually check if the text box is empty. So that's effective. So now all you have to do is to duplicate this one with other text boxes. This is for this one. Sorry, this one. So this one, this is for text description, so product description. Okay, this one is for txt discount. So let's say discount value or discount percentage. So it's okay if you're checking of empty text boxes is not sequential. So what other things that we need to check? Quantity. Okay, so quantity, quantity. So product or quantity value must not be empty. Okay, also let us check if the what other reorder level. Okay, the reorder value. Okay, another piece, discount price. What the price? Did I mention the price already? Okay, the price. Okay, so since by default our combo box is selecting the first record, so it will be, I think it's not necessary to check, since when you run the form it actually displays the first record. So product code, okay, product price. Okay, so try to test. Okay, so new product, save. Okay, product code is not left blank. Okay, so it's now actually focusing my screen. So 33, save. Okay, description, test 3. Okay, save. By the way, it actually saved because our form here contains value. So we will just checking if blank, but notice we have 0. So how do we correct that? So to correct that, we need to create, of course, condition and uh, check if the input is numeric. Okay, so let's try to do that. So to validate numeric value, so let's start by creating a new method. So let's add a new method. So method. So in this method, we will be checking if the data is numeric. So let's say check numeric. Double or integer is still a numeric value. So to do that, public static. Okay, so let's remove this one. Okay. Okay, so let's okay. Static. Let me maximize the space. Static boolean check or check number. Okay, check is numeric. That's I think. Okay, so we'll be using string the value to check, and it will return true or false. Okay. In this particular example, I will be using the double since I want to recognize if the data is double or string or integer. So I'll be using double. So num. Okay. So if double that try parse, so the value string, so value, and of course out and num. So if this particular condition successfully converted my value to double, it will return true, while not, if not, it will return a false, which means the value is not numeric. So return true. Okay, so take this shortcut. Okay. Else I will be returning false. Else return false. So in this particular method, oh, by the way, close this. Okay. So in this particular statement, it will check if the data is numeric or not. So let's try to implement that. Okay, so let's check if the quantity is numeric. So if CLS database that check is numeric, so I'll be checking the txt quantity. It is numeric. That text, because I'm be transferring the contents coming from the. Okay, so if not numeric, okay, so return, we'll be using the return, that's why. Okay, oh, I forgot to add. Okay, so let's double check. Okay, by the way, if it is not numeric, so let's add a statement that informs the user. Okay, by the way, let us modify this one. Instead of string value, we use the text box so that we can focus the text box. Txt value. Okay, so that text. Okay, now let us copy paste this one. Let's also add some title. So string title, so that we can mention title. We can mention what's wrong. Okay. Okay. There you go. Title must be a number. Must be a number. Okay. Invalid. valid number. Okay, so I will replace this one. Okay, so let's also mention the value that select all so that it will be highlighted, something like that. Okay, so let's start. I forgot to change. Okay, so this one will be using that name of the text box, then the name quantity. Okay, so I have takes one argument. Okay, so let's value. Okay, check is numeric. Then okay. What seems to be the problem? No overload. Check numeric title. Let's redo it. So txt quantity comma title quantity. So, okay, I forgot to use this one. Okay, then return. Okay, so that's not working. So let's try. Let's try. Okay, so test number 4, if I'm not mistaken. So use 444 test for quantity. Let's say we don't input numeric. Okay, save. Quantity must be a number. Okay, so what if the quantity is 0? So let's try to add another. So we can just add condition if let's say int 32 dot parse. So we will converting the number quantity dot text is greater or less than 1. Of course, we'll be mentioning that. Okay, just copy paste this one. So why don't we create another? Anyway, just copy paste this one. It depends upon your application if it requires 0 or not. So we will be using this one. Quantity must be greater than 0. 0. Invalid quantity. Okay, so let's make the text box focus. Return true. Okay. Object expression. Refill. Okay, now okay. Okay, return. Sorry. Okay, so let's try. What if test 4 instead non-numeric save, but instead 0 save. Okay, greater than 0. So that's how you check the validity of your. Okay, I'm not going to continue this. So when you develop the application, just duplicate this one so that other type will be validated. So to make our video short, so let us continue. Next is we need to allow the user to edit or modify our existing record. So first, the user needs to select a record from the list. So in this example, we have this existing test item. So how do we edit it? So the user must select an item, then click edit. So how do we edit an item? First, you need to identify which record is selected. When the user clicks this button, so the button is edit. So you must identify which record is selected. Second, you need to uh, identify from the second form, which is this one, that you are editing a record. So you need to load the selected record coming from the previous form. So which means when you select this record for editing, the record must be present here so that we can modify the record. And when the user is satisfied with the modification, so they need to, or he or she needs to click the save to update the record. But notice this form. So we'll be using this form or reusing this form as our window to edit the record. So we must identify how this form will process request. First, we need to set condition that if this form is for adding new record, it must contain blank field. Otherwise, if this form process a edit or updating a record, we must load the existing record coming from the database. So that's the logic about this application. So let's start. Okay, so let's go to our list. So let us double click our data grid. Okay, so when you double click your data grid, okay, double click the data grid, nothing happens. Okay, to make sure, okay, if it doesn't work, go to event and look for a specific event that triggers the selection of record. For example, in this case, since we will try to identify selected content or selected content rather, we must identify a method for cell content click. So go to the properties of the data grid view, click the event, and choose cell content click. Just double click here like that, and it will activate a method called the data grid view cell content click, because we are trying to identify if the user selected or clicked the button edit or delete. So that's why cell content click. In some other cases, there are few methods that you can also use, but for the meantime, let us use this method first. Okay, so let's move. So how do we identify if the record is selected? First, we must check if the user actually selected a record. So T means this is the grid view cell arguments, which means you are trying to identify each row. So row index, T dot row index is greater than or equal to 0. So it means each row in your data grid starts with an array, or it starts with 0. So it's like an array, start with 0. So is the user selected a row coming from your data grid? If yes, we must identify what particular record that the user selected, so that when he or she clicks the edit, that's the point where we identify on our database that we are updating that record. So let's start by identifying description. So I think it's really important to describe or to announce to the user that you are trying to edit this, something like that. So let's identify the product description. Okay, so to identify the selected row from the data grid view, you must type the data grid view name followed by rows, of method rows, and row index, which means you are trying to identify the index selected. Then address the cell, meaning the column. So Since our data grid view displays description on the second column, so it starts with array, so 0, this one is 0, 1, so we try to identify that the cell 1 or column number 2 value that display. So we are retrieving the column number 2 from the data grid view. So it addressed as 1 because I just what I have mentioned. So it's actually starts with 0. Okay, next we try to identify the product code that we are trying to edit. So let's copy paste this one. Copy the data grid view name, addressing the row, which index come from the row is selected, and cell 0. This is the code, okay, of product code. Okay, then okay. Now, once the user identified the particular column, let us now identify what particular button is clicked. So in this case, we have rows 1, we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So the 6 and 7 column is dedicated to edit and delete. So the column number 6 or in index, it is addressed as 0. 5 is for edit, so we must condition. So let's say we use switch, okay, instead of if. So e dot row index is greater than, okay, e dot column, rather e dot column index. Okay, so which particular column is clicked? So let's try to identify if the selected column is number 5 or index 5, which means we are processing a break. We are processing an edit. So edit products or product, something like that, because the button is addressed in the column number 6 or index 5 in our data grid. So we must display the form. So after m product at edit, update product, name the object as update product, equals to new frm edit. Okay, and then update product that show dialog. Product that show dialog. Okay, so that it will display as model. Okay, so let's try to display if we identify correctly what record to edit. So let's display. The purpose of this line is for me to identify if I properly selected, or when the user select a record, I properly identify it. So run, and let's wait for it. Okay, so let's say select test number 2, so edit. Okay, so now I now be able to identify which particular record is selected for editing. Now it's of course show the dialog box. Let's do okay, so it's working now. So next, our next task right now is for us to be able to load the record to be modified. But in our case, our initial form allows us to input a new record. So how do we make our add and edit form determine if we are going to add or edit a record? So let's go to the form event and look for form load. Okay, like this one. Okay, so in this case, we must modify this load event or load method so that when the user clicks an edit button from previous form, we can easily identify if the record is actually for editing. So, first we must send in this form that the record that we are trying to edit is this particular ID. So let's declare our variable first. So I'm using private so that the variable is actually used in this particular class or form on. So string pcode equals blank, and I'm going to add an argument string pcode here so that if this variable is blank, which means our form is in add uh, method or mode, add mode, something like that. This is just an identifier if our form is in add or update uh, processes. So, okay, so let's try. Okay, so by the way, since we already add this one, so let's modify our code here in our product list because we added an argument to show the form. So therefore, it expects that we must pass an argument. So here we go. So now, in your edit, so I'm going to remove this message box and I'm going to send the retrieve or selected product code to the add edit form, and of course in our new button I'm going to send blank, which means this is for adding a new. Okay, so let's go back to the add edit and go back to our method. Sorry, let's go back to our method. Okay, so where is my form load? Form load. Okay, so again, please, if you miss the explanation of why we need to add this one, go back to the previous time. Okay, now our focus right now is in the form load. So we must now, by the way, after receiving this, so we must check if, so I forgot to write statement that if pcode is not equal to null, meaning it has a value, therefore pcode will be contains the value transferred coming from the argument. Okay, so something like that. So it means if this value has a contains, or when this form is open, it has a value of pcode, so it will be transferred to this particular variable, so that when we go to the form load, we will try to ask, is this form is for editing or adding a new record? So that's the purpose of that. Okay, so let's check. Okay, so let us try. If is pcode that you try to use, okay, this is actually the variable from here. You are asking if this is not null or not blank, not equal to null, which means your form is used for editing purposes. So otherwise, that is used for adding a record. So that's what it's all about. Now, since my code is not equal to blank because I'm going to edit the record, so we will be querying a particular record. String SQL again, then select asterisk from product. Okay, where the code I'm referring to this particular column here. So since we transferred the code from previous form to the add edit form, so we try to identify the record that pertains to the particular code. So let's okay, varchar is the data type of the B code. So use simple code. Okay, and close. And now we need to use the variable here. Okay, and the underscore code. Okay, so now we are now trying to retrieve the record. Okay, and now let's reuse the query data here. Okay, this one, let's reuse that. So let us retrieve the record. Okay, so data table, we use let's say product equals cls database dot query data. Okay, then SQL. Okay, so now this record will now contain a specific record coming from your database. So if your product that rows that count, which means we have retrieved a data, we need to display it one at a time in a text box. So therefore, type the text box name text equals. So to display the product per column, so you need to call in the data table product that rows. Okay, and 0, which means the first index of the table, and followed by the column name. So in this case, our column for the product is this one. So let us copy paste that. Okay. Okay. That to string. Okay. And then let's do the same thing with other text boxes. Description. Okay. Descript. Oops. Sorry. Was the paste. Paste. Okay. Then next is txt quantity. Oh, let's do this one. Dot text equals paste instead use the price button. Okay, so let's for price we call that field. Okay, so there. Next, discount. I forgot to mention the discount. Paste. Okay, next is to change the count. Okay. And of course, aside from discount, quantity text equals okay, this one is quantity or the number of stocks. Okay, and then another thing that we forgot is okay, code, description, price, and discount. Of course, we need to allow to identify which vendor is owned this particular product. So we must paste and choose the code because the column that pertains to vendor code is this one, the code. Okay, so let's proceed. Okay, now let's test. Run. Let's see what will happen. Okay. Okay, so now this is now your form. Let's try to test or select test number 3, then edit. Something might be wrong. Okay, so now code. Okay, so I have an invalid column, which means, okay, I forgot to put the underscore here. So let's try to run again. Continue reading. Oops, I forgot the letter O. Bad, sorry. Oops. Okay. Run. I think it's working now. Okay, so there. Notice that it's 0 because the previous record is 0. So let's try another record. Say this one. To build complete data. So this one is the supplier. Let's see if it's working. Okay, so now we have the record. The order level 0. Stop. Okay, let's try another. 0 again. Oh, I think I forgot to put the reorder there. Yeah. Minimum. Okay, so let's add that particular. Oops. Okay. So txt reorder that text. So let's copy paste this line here. Paste. Look for the reference. Minimum. So this one is the field that we. Okay. Now, in modifying record, we need to make sure that the ID cannot be modified because that's the primary key that we need to disallow the user to modify. So txt code that read only equals. Okay, so let's try. Okay, so let me. Okay, so that's the entire code to load selected record. So this is now your program. Okay, so let me adjust. Okay, so there you go. Okay, so let me try to select the record. This one is for Ordfa Incorporated, edit, and now we can successfully say that we can modify this one. So this one is unable to edit because it's black. Now we can modify this one, etc. We can also modify this one. Okay, so now let us save any changes that we perform coming from the record. So let's go back to our edit form and choose save. Okay. Okay, so now it's okay to have this one since even if you modify, still the data is required. Okay, now we have a separate command to modify a particular record. So how do we identify if the command is for adding and the command is for editing? So let us reuse our variable pcode. This one is the variable we declared privately from above. So if the variable from above or pcode is not equal to blank, meaning this particular statements inside this condition will execute a update, or else if the variable pcode is equals to blank, we will performing this one. So let's okay. So this one is for insert into. This will be executed if the pcode is blank, meaning it's for adding a new record. But if the record or the form contains pcode, which means we are going to update a record. So let's update. This one is delete. Okay, now how do we perform update? So in order to do that, you must again perform query. Okay, so we have in SQL command, we have what we call update command. Okay, so to do that, let me resize my screen so that it can be okay, viewable. Okay, so to do that, we must type the word update. Update, what particular table that we are going to modify? Product. Update, product. Okay, we need to set a particular value. Okay, so what particular value are you are going to set? So the first thing that we need to identify is the, of course, product description. So the description, okay, equals semicolon. Okay, something like that. Okay, under is product, what you call that, quantity on hand, if it is taken, factory here. Okay, product on hand, minimum, price, discount, and decode. So let's identify one at a time. So equals, since quantity on hand is a numeric, so no need for semicolon or single quote. We are going to replace that with a value followed by uh, product, the order level, so the minimum equals is it's also a number, so no need to. Okay, next is discount. Discount equals comma or comma. So this will be replaced by value data. The purpose of doing this is for me to be able to identify what particular column that I'm going to modify. Then of course the decode. So will be, since decode is numeric, so this one. And of course we need to make a condition that we are trying to edit specific product on. So e underscore code equals, okay, something like that. Now let us add the contents of, it's the same with this one, so let us, you know, copy paste or just do this. Two double quotes. The first quote is for this string and the second quote is for this string to be open. Okay, then two plus sign and the text box that contains the data, description, text. Okay, for quantity on hand, notice we have unclosed string, so we need to close it. Okay, and blank. Then of course open string again, or you can just ignore this one, something like that. Okay, and then put two equal sign at double quotes and plus sign, okay, something like that. Okay, I guess this is not working, so let us close this first. Okay, so I guess it's working now. Quotes and plus, okay, oops, okay. So now let us replace or add the contents from text box. See quantity, so this would be the quantity that text. Okay, next let's open up string, two double quotes, two plus sign, and the name of the text box correspond to that particular record. So I order that text. And then of course we need to close down this string because it could displace an error. And then for concatenation. Next, this one. Okay, two plus sign. Oops, quotes first. Okay, two plus sign. Quote. Then the discount. Okay. Now let us continue. Quotes. Decode. Okay. Plus CBO vendor that selected value. Okay, then open the string. Okay, now condition, we need to use this one. Two double quotes to close the string and to open this string. Two plus sign for concatenating. and put the center the variable. Okay, so now we are going to run the update command to into our database. And how do we do that? This one will do the execution. So just reuse this one. And then record successfully saved. Something like that. Okay, so how do we determine if we're trying to save new or update a product? So of course you can just create another string. So let's try string message title equals, let's say new say new product by default. Okay, so in this case we are going to use the title and instead of new product update. And this one okay, now let's replace this with next box title. Box title. Okay, so before we continue running the program, let's go back to our list and let us copy this one from new so that we can also reorder or uh, refresh the list if the user click the what you call that, edit. Okay, so let's go to our form and look for the cell content and put it below the switch state. Okay, so let's try. Okay, so let's try modifying this one. Edit. Okay, so as you can see, I have now the record for 333 test 3. So let's save guard 100 ml. This is just an example. So I ordered 1000 for stocks and the order level 20 and the price of this is, let's say, 100. Discount none. So let's try to connect this product to Gomez Brothers. So in this case, this one will be replaced with safeguard 100 ml. The stocks will be 1000, the price would be 100, and the new vendor would be Gomez Brothers. Save. Okay, I have an error. So I have near product code. So let's examine what's wrong. Okay, so let's go to our form. Now I see what the problem is. So the problem is it's actually near here. So please make sure when you do this one, it actually connects this string to that string here. So make sure you need to put some space. Okay, so stop. Put some stop. Okay, so let's do that again. Okay, so let's test it again. Edit. Okay. Guard 100 grams. Okay. Something like that. Just an example. Okay. Then price 100. Discount na. Then we need to use Gomez Brothers. Save. I forgot to sorry, plenty of errors. It's actually products, not product. Okay. So my bad. Products. So I forgot to add. Yeah, I forgot to add U. So it's anyway, that's normal. Okay, let us proceed. Sorry for this delay. So safeguard. Okay. Make sure you type the correct safeguard 100 grams. 1000. Then price 100. No discount. Promise brother, save. Okay, so now let us try if this 333 is now safeguard. Okay, 333, where are you? Okay, so now, oh, what about the price? Let us see what happened to the price. It's not actually modified. Okay, I forgot to mention the price. So that's why. What's the price of p underscore price? I think this now will be working. So that uh, xt price that text. It's okay to uh, make this query not in order, just like what we do for based on the list of the table field. So it's okay not to make it in order. Okay, and plus. Okay, okay. So let's try again. Ah, I forgot to put the comma to separate the string or the field. Okay. So again, let's try to modify the 333. This time, I'm going to modify to add the price. Save. Oh! What's wrong? Comma. The price. Ah, I forgot to put the equal sign. My bad. Sorry. Okay. So go back to this one, repeat, and 100. Okay, so let's try. Safeguard now 100. So that's all about add or edit. Now, let's go to our product list, and when you press the delete button, the record will be deleted. Okay, so let's try. Go back to the method for uh, data grid. Now, instead of case 5, we use case 6. Case 6 because the user click the delete button. So break. Okay. Now, what will happen here? So in this example, we'll be writing the statements to delete our record. But of course, we make sure that the user that uh, will perform the action is actually sure that they need to delete the record. So let's put some what you call this, uh, ask the user a question if the action is actually, or he or she is sure of the action. So if let's say message box that show, let's say, let's put some message, this action will permanently delete some description plus. Okay, let me make the screen more. Okay, so this one we will be try to identify the product name that the user will be deleting. Description double quotes and code. Okay, something like that. Are you sure you want to delete blah 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 product? Something like that. So, question. Okay, something like that. Okay, from there, we will also what you call this, ask a question. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to continue performing this action? Okay. Question mark. By the way, let's remove this one. Already have question mark in action. Okay, so let's put the code here below. Okay, next is let's say delete product, and then let's provide message box buttons. Okay, let's say okay cancel. So the user will pop, a message box will pop up asking for user to delete. He or she will be choose okay or cancel button. Then message box icon, let's say question icon question like that. Okay, since this message box is located in my if condition, so I will be checking if the chosen button is equals to okay button. So dialog resolve that okay. Okay. Now, something like that. Okay, so let's see what will happen. Okay, let's delete this one, test one, delete. Okay, so this action will permanently delete test one. That's the product name. Are you sure you want to continue performing this action? Okay, cancel. So let's determine if the user select okay. So if the user selected okay, we must perform an action. Okay, so how do we do that? We need to create a query. Okay, something like that. So delete from product where, so we're trying to delete the product itself. Code, single quote, oops, equals single quote, something like that. Okay. So the code that we are trying to delete is the selected code from the list. So we are going to replace blank with double quotes, plus, in the middle is the product. Okay, so we're going to execute this one. And to do this, let us perform the query. So let's do some try and catch. So the purpose of try and catch is to capture any error while executing the record. But anyway, we already have this try and catch in our class. So let's identify. Where is that? Okay, so if the execute non-query encounters an error, so this will display this one. But by the way, this is not this would not be connection database action. Okay, so now let's go back to our list. Okay, so CLS database that execute query. So SQL. So if this is working, we'll be notifying the user that, oops, go back to show the record successfully deleted. Okay. Of course, delete record. And the message box buttons that icon would be information. That information, something like that. So that's the purpose of writing the button or choices and icon. Make it, presentable or appropriate message. Okay, so now after doing that, of course, since the record is deleted inside the database but not in your data grid, so we need also to update or reload our existing record. Okay, so I guess we already done that here. So it will automatically refresh. So let's try. Okay, so now let's try to delete test one. So delete, are you sure? Cancel. Okay, nothing happens. This one, delete, are you sure? Yes. Record successfully deleted. Okay, so now your record is now refreshed and your data grid is now refreshed. So that's what you call CRUD. But anyway, CRUD means create. We already performed the insert. Read, we already performed the select statement from previous activities. update. So we already performed that, and delete. So that's actually the four what we call that, elementary commands for processes for record management. So that's the actually processes involved in uh, system development that allows us to manage records. So I hope you learned something, and I hope if you don't understand the things that I discussed, you can also go back to, okay, always go back to the video and watch it again for particular things that you don't understand, or you just post your comments in my YouTube channel and also in our LMS page or portal. So I hope you actually understand and follow the sequence of my instruction. So for review, so we have already performed the needed uh, task. So that's all. So thank you, and have a nice day.